Awesome.
Welcome to this.podcast, where it's all about dope people, dope conversations, and compelling stories. I'm your friendly host, Jay, joined by my brother and friends. We got Mike here.
You ready to boogie with that
We
bear?
got Co.
Man, what we talking about?
And we got Uncle Damo.
my name is Uncle
Good day.
You can find this.podcast at linktree/this.podcast, and we'll meet you where you're at. And we got viewership on YouTube. Today is a special day because we have a partnership with, we've always had a partnership with the incredible Lawrence and Larimer Clothing and Supply Company here in Denver, Colorado. Move it number 5. This is a live audience. We up in here. It's a good vibe. JC, Kiana, thank you for everything that you do. Yes, as always. And special shout out to Buffalo Wild Wings, Hugo Martinez in the house. He supplied the wings and the food for this lovely event. And again, we have a hot meal giveaway. Check it out on IG. We'll post the skit. Only thing that's required is follow us on IG. You got to live in the Denver metro area. And yeah, tag somebody in the comments on this post, and we'll help them out.
You will get a free meal sent to you.
Absolutely.
We did ask about vegan options too on the chat, didn't we?
Hey man,
We did.
We're not.
We'll get there.
We don't have the resources to do that, man.
Is there any vegans in the audience?
No. Everybody's eating wings.
Everybody got meat in their teeth.
Gluten-free as well? Okay.
Gluten-free options on the wings.
And last but not least, we want to give a shout out to Jessica for keeping the party live. She's serving the drinks. Great hospitality. Jessica, we're going to tag your IG or any
She's
social
walking in
that
front
you
of the
need.
camera right now, just
No? Okay, she's off the grid. She does not want to be found unless you're coming to get some drinks. So tip your lovely bartenders. And we're excited about today because
before we introduce our illustrious guest,
okay.
somebody needs to pay up for their financials.
Ooh,
Somebody's
$100
in
bet.
debt up here.
Okay, talk
Debt
more.
Damo. He lost a bet
My name
last
is
week.
Det Damo.
Yeah, because you always lose bets to me.
So what was the bet?
So you always owe.
Oh, so he's sunning you. He basically sunning
Big
you.
bro. Bro.
Basically, if I keep
did you
betting
something.
Damien, I'm going to need like a 1099 or something. Because he always owes me money.
I've never owed you over $600.
We going
Over
to get there.
600.
We going to get there slowly.
So the bet was 49ers over the Rams. I lost. I can take it.
You got another bet though, right?
I was sad. What was the other bet?
Was there? I don't know.
No, there's another one coming up that you can't dunk.
Oh,
Drop
yeah.
step. Drop step.
Drop step.
Drop step dunk?
No,
Let
I
me
thought it was
whip.
vertical.
Let me nay.
You don't want to show the cash to the camera?
So next week,
Oh, no, he got it. He
that's
got
between
Okay.
us. You know what I'm
Okay.
saying?
That's what
I ain't
made-
put
All
him
right.
out there like that.
Were you paying up?
He paid up.
I paid
Okay.
up.
He
There we
put
go.
the cash in my hand.
All right,
But next
good man.
week, after I
he
show him
he
the
put his
video of the
money up in them
dunks,
All right,
scrubs he
man.
has
We
on.
Moving
ain't here
on.
for bets. We here for this guest right here to my left. He, a very special guest, especially to our hearts because he's from the Park Hill neighborhood.
Absolutely.
In the house. Not only is he from the Park Hill neighborhood, but he also runs a school in the Park Hill neighborhood, a thriving school, bilingual program. He's just doing so many amazing things there. Let's give it a nice round of applause for Mike Atkins. Welcome to the show, brother. We're glad to have you.
That's what's up. I'm happy to be here.
Well, this has been in the making for a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah?
Absolutely.
And you're a busy guy. And, you know, the fact that you're on this show is, we're honored because you've done interviews with the big dogs. We talking CNN, locally ABC, the Today Show.
My man was on BBC.
BBC, man. His story has been worldwide.
Oh,
and
syndicated news having ass.
and he took some time out of his busy evening to come hang with us. So we're glad to have you, man.
Absolutely. I wanted to definitely make this a priority.
Absolutely.
Seeing what my brothers is doing. brothers that are from
Gotta
the
have you
same
talking to the mic. He got that
Brothers.
radio voice too.
Absolutely.
He too cool, man.
brothers that are from the same community that I'm from. Wanted to make this a priority so we can do this, so we could represent. We got to collaborate. I think we always have to model what collaboration looks like on all levels. So,
Yeah.
so happy to be here.
Absolutely. And
Absolutely.
tonight we're gonna have some fun and we're gonna get serious. So we're gonna hit the whole spectrum.
do
All
it.
right,
Let's
you
do
ready
it.
for that?
Absolutely.
I know you
So
are.
how much fun can we have with a principal next to us, man?
All the fun, man. He should
Every
be
time-
used to this, man.
Nah, but
like
every
we
ti-
should be small
Hey, you
fries
act like
what he
he's
has
like
to deal
he's
with.
like not human.
No, but
Yeah.
every
How much
ti-
fun can we
We
have
gonna
with
talk
principal?
about
Courtney's
Every
talking about being
time-
sent to the principal's office.
every
Something.
time exactly. Every
Yeah,
time
yeah,
I
yeah.
have fun, I was sent to the principal's office.
Hey,
It
you
was
just
not
let us know when we're in
a good-
detention.
Okay.
Like, yo, you
Sauce.
get,
Hey, what's Courtney's safe word? Bidet.
Bidet. No, but we're going to talk about that perception.
No, trickle,
Yeah,
trickle,
absolutely.
trickle.
Yeah.
Trickle.
Triple.
So I'll start us off, and so your story has been out there for a while, right? And you answered this, I'm sure, plenty of times of like how you became a principal, right? So for you, it was starting from knocking on the door of like actually trying to be a teacher, trying to get where you fit in as far as the school system, and then eventually Carrie Redlin opened her arms to you, and that was a childhood school teacher.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and what school was that at?
Brownwell. I was bused out of Park Hill.
Shout out to
Gotcha.
Bromwell.
That's the one off? Is that Hamden in Monaco?
No, that's so that was Hamilton, my middle school.
Gotcha.
But Brownwell's Cherry Creek, so it's like right off. Yeah, so it's right over by the Cherry Creek Mall.
Got it.
Absolutely.
Got it.
So you feel like she's the impetus and responsible for like a lot of where you're at today, right?
Absolutely.
So with that, like, tell us a little bit about like that journey of like you taking your childhood and the things you learned in the school system, the things that were the pros and cons, and then how you try to implement that at Stedman Elementary.
Yeah, that's a loaded. How long we got here?
Oh,
Hey,
We got time, brother.
We got time.
We got time. This is a conversation. However you want to go.
We got time, cuz.
Well, what's today? I got time, right? No, just growing up in Park Hill, I thought Park Hill was the four corners of the world. Literally, I didn't know anything but Park Hill.
Got it.
So, being bussed out of Park Hill and then bussed back in, I started to understand like when I was bussed to middle school, like started to understand like there's a difference here, right? Like these kids, I know, we can go all the way back to the Wilford Keys case, right? In the Wilford Keys case that happened right in Park Hill, and it's the desegregation of schools case in Denver, but it's the first of a kind because
Right.
it made history itself. It was the first in collaboration with Latino, Hispanic, and Black families. And we have a little bit of that still in the school, and it's called the consent decree, and it's how we serve our English language learners.
Got it.
And we'll talk about how the once busing started with the Wilford Keys case, and how that transitioned into the consent decree, where Black people were like, nah, we got what we wanted, which was equality within schools, and we don't need anything else. And our Hispanic Latino friends was like, nah, we pushing on because we
need more.
We need more, right? So I'm always going back to like, what would schools be if we would have still latched on to that case and did something different in collaboration with our Latino and Hispanic friends in Park Hill, because they have court order to where how they need to be treated and served in public schools. And I think eventually that's what we need as African American students and colleagues and workers. We need something stable there. But with that said, growing up in Park Hill, all I knew was the neighborhood, right? I was a product of my environment.
Right.
And I had good influence, which was my older brother. Most of you guys know my older brother, Leonard Atkins.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And, growing up in a household, single mom.
For those that don't,
Uh-huh.
tell us just a little snippet about your brother.
Man, that's my mentor. He's with us right here today. That is my guy, and I wouldn't be here without his guidance in life.
Got it.
He was my older brother. He was 3 years older than me. Most of you guys know him from football.
Yep.
And just growing up in the neighborhood, while y'all are all screaming Pirates and Park Hill Falcons and all the other Park Hill organizations, my mom was freaked out by what was happening in Park Hill, so she made us play for the Bombers.
Yep.
Wait, who in the hell are the Bombers?
I have no clue.
Y'all don't know
I
who
know
the
the Bombers.
are?
No,
You
I
know
know
the
the
Bombers?
Bombers.
Damien, we
I don't know
played
where
the
they practice,
Bombers
but I
at
know
Park
the
Hill.
the Bombers.
we
With
at
the
Congress
Pirates,
Park.
with the Pirates, we played the Bombers.
So we
used to
beat
kick
them
they
like
ass.
28-point rule in like the first
Yeah,
quarter.
yo, we
Mercy
used to
rule.
really rule like the running clock,
Yeah.
thing. Or you have to play defense.
And Damo got an interception.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
played offensive line.
I
That
can
was full-time
distinctly-
defense after half.
Full-time defense. at
I
the
could
half.
distinctly remember my older brother getting kicked out of the game because he was hitting y'all too hard.
I don't remember that.
Yeah,
Talk
you
to him.
remember it.
No, I don't
Damo.
remember that.
Talk to him.
Nah, but that was my mentor, growing up in the household, middle child, single parent household. My mom was a rock.
Yeah.
We didn't have everything we wanted, but we didn't need for anything, right? Like
Right.
she did her best. She bent over backwards for her boys. But at the same time, there was so many things happening in our community.
There
Right?
was.
Summer of Violence, 1993.
Yep.
We just had so many influences in our community. And, I remember distinctly getting off the bus in middle school and like any car that drove past, looking out the
pressed.
corner, straight press,
Pressed.
scared.
So in middle school,
Yeah.
where were you being bused from?
From 30th and Newport all the way to Tamarack, basically Hampton.
Yep.
And
Yep.
So by TJ.
You said it
Yep.
was
Right by
Hamilton.
TJ.
Hamilton, right?
Hamilton.
So you went to
Gotcha.
Hamilton.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
right
so,
next to
so,
home.
so I may
That's
be
why I
off.
went.
So I may be a little off, but I know if you stayed north of 32nd, which is MLK, for example, I lived on Ivy, so I was bused out to Hill Middle School. If you lived, I
Yeah,
think,
south of that, we went to
yeah.
home.
Then if you, yep. Then if you
Yep.
lived like east of Quebec, so he's saying Newport, you were going out to Hamilton. And then if you were Dahlia, maybe like a little west of me, you went to Gove. And then if you lived south of MLK, kind of where you guys were living, James, like 28th, like that 28th and down, you went to Smiley, which
Yep.
honestly, Mike, in my opinion, it really perplexed me. Why I never understood why I was being bussed out. So this is a perfect conversation because I didn't understand
Right.
why I went to Hill when Smiley was literally maybe 10 blocks from me.
Yeah, so with that, I think, and you're alluding to it, is the pros of doing that, right? Because it's, hey, and correct me if I'm wrong at any time, because that's what you're here to, let us know, let the audience learn something that with the busing, what it did do is give us that integration and, going to the different neighborhoods, understanding and seeing what you see out there as far as me going to home, you going to Hill, etc. So I think for me growing up, that was beneficial, right? And when they stopped doing that, I think that's when everything changed,
Exactly.
as far as the neighborhoods not getting the resources that they need. And now that, Park Hill is being gentrified, et cetera, which is good because I'm all about change, right? The only thing I push back a little bit on is that, the people that were there or are here is like, let's kind of work together so that everybody's reaping the benefits and it's not just kind of one-sided, right? And I don't want to get down a rabbit hole, but can you talk a little bit about that on the education side of like the things that you're dealing with, what you noticed in your childhood and what's, you're trying to implement today at Stedman to make sure that that diversity and the things that you have going on at the school?
Yeah, I had neighbors. I had some of my best friends in the neighborhood being bussed out. And I didn't understand at the time. And what we have to understand, like, the case happened in Park Hill because it was saying that the schools didn't have the resources, right? The equitable resources you had in the middle class, upper class neighborhoods. Those schools had the resources. So the case was about, like, equality around the resources. And my experience was different, right? Like, I was bussed out to, 15 miles from my neighborhood,
Right.
right? And at first it was nothing, right? I was used to it. I remember distinctly in 6th grade getting off the bus, and it was raining this early fall morning, right? And I remember getting off the bus, and I'm learning my routines and rituals. I go stand in the line that I go to every day, and I walk past the gym teacher, and she says, "Here comes the bus kids." And it was so matter of fact, right?
Wow.
Like, at the time, I was like, "Yeah, she's right. Like, here come the bus kids.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
here.
I just got off the
Yeah.
bus.
Y'all better get ready."
I'm representing.
I'm representing.
I'm here.
But I started to understand
What
right,
that meant.
What that meant. Like, that was a little deeper than just a statement of "here the bus kids."
Kind of like a microaggression.
that's what I was
right?
Oh no, that's
Absolutely.
a macro aggression.
Yeah. No,
That's
because,
an aggression.
yeah, because that experience was totally different.
Yeah.
Right. Like, when I looked around, we were on the second floor, the East Wing. The Hispanic students was on the second floor, West Wing. All the white GT students was on the first floor.
Gifted and talented.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. And I started understanding that we were treated different, right? I started to understand that "here comes the bus kids" had a totally different connotation to it.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
It was, "Oh, here comes the naughty kids." So when I think about my teachers and my work at Stedman, like, we have a very diverse school in the midst of gentrification, right?
Yep.
And that's intentional. We do a lot of recruitment to make sure that we can have authentic learning happening just by being in the same room with different individuals, right? And then I really think about, like, what didn't those teachers have
Right.
to say that I was the bus kids, right? Because the course case was powerful. Like, it was supposed to serve a purpose, but there was a gap that was missed, right? And that gap was building the capacity of the teachers, understanding that we have systemic racism is all around us, right? Like,
Right.
our biases come into play every moment of every day. I'm doing brain work with my staff right now to understand that we're all processing right now 5,000 pieces of information. You can't do that, right? But what you have to do is truly, right? Pause. You got to slow that down, right? When you see Damo walking through the hallway, you got to slow that down, right?
Absolutely.
You can't just process and filter through and make sense, because that's what your brain does. It makes sense of the information that it's receiving, right? So your brain is making sense, your biases is coming into play, and you're trying to move on through life, right? So we have to slow down.
Man, so I have a question, man, and I just want to just get this elephant just put it out there. You have a school of thought that says that integration is not good. Integration literally set African American people back. We would be further along if schools and neighborhoods remain segregated. What are your thoughts on that, man? Because it's a charged conversation. Because I think we're in this space where groups of people are like, we're starting to have these conversations, but we're also trying to retract in the silos as well. So what are your thoughts on the desegregation of schools? Was it a good thing? or was it a positive thing?
You mean a negative?
A negative.
A negative thing.
Yep,
Sorry,
we're with
Terramana.
Terramana sauce.
Yeah, I blame it on Terramana.
You know, that's a loaded question. I think there's spaces for our black children to be illuminated and be themselves, right? And be celebrated for being themselves. I also know that it's our responsibility to prepare them for the world that they're going to interact in, right? They're not going to interact in an all-black world.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
You know, we have so many examples of adults right now going through moments of systemic racism where they're fouling, florists, right? We could talk about that case.
NFL coach fired from Miami Dolphins. Yes,
absolutely. So there's so many instances, right? And it's our job that we need to prepare all students, right?
Right.
But especially our black babies, because they haven't been prepared.
That's a fact. That's a fact. Because yo, man, I love Montbello High School. Shout out to Montbello High School.
Yep.
But I have to keep it 100, man. Montbello, it was a wonderful place to go to high school. Where it hurt me is when I went from Montbello High School, that was predominantly African American, to Arizona State University. And literally having to understand how to navigate in a world where you're literally the only black student in an auditorium of 500 students.
Code switch.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how do I code switch? Along with being black and being an athlete and the stereotypes that come with that. And how do I really teach myself how to operate in those arenas? Because I wasn't really used to having white coaches.
Right.
I wasn't used to literally having to have social relationships with white people. Even though we come from Denver, Colorado, Park Hill was really insulated in those days.
It was.
So I really had to teach myself. So when Mike says that we have to train our kids about what the real world looks like. And I remember kind of doing some research and looking at Stedman. Stedman is literally catty corner from my house. And I remember kind of when I got to my house, Stedman was 85% African American at that time.
Yep.
And I have a white neighbor but shout out to Jules and Joe. They're
Jules.
Hey,
Jules
man.
and Joe in the house.
Yo, shout out to Jules and Joe. Jules is a white woman, right? Who has this her mother was a professor out in Africa. So she knows what it is, right? And she really wanted to work towards changing Stedman. And to go from 85% to 30, I think is awesome.
Absolutely. And
Wait, what? So
When I say 30,
but why is it awesome?
It's
Just curious.
So when I say 30, and 30.
I know what you mean, but why is it
So
awesome?
it went from 85% African American to 30% white, 30% black, 30% Hispanic. The rest is other. And I would watch white parents literally take their kids to Park Hill Elementary, which is in a affluent part of Park Hill in my judgment, right? Or take their kids to private school, right? As opposed to taking them to right in the neighborhood school where they ultimately should.
Where they get exposed to real life.
Where they get exposed to real
That's why I
life.
was
To
asking
black
why.
kids.
Well, no, 30 is what you
Yeah.
said.
No, but I'm saying what I'm saying is it was 85% African American. It was a white flight out of the neighborhood to have their kids attend school. Now it has changed
To
to
30,
where
30, 30.
Yeah, so I think that describes the busing, right? Of you need that mix because we all interact with each other in a real world, right? If you're not going to be isolated as far as it doesn't matter what race, religion, whatever you are,
Right.
there's going to be a mix. I mean, unless you're forcefully trying to find those pockets, good luck. You probably, difficulties there. But I want to get back to you because you have it's Black History Month and you have a special curriculum that you focus on at Stedman. And I want you to talk about that as far as I saw it on the news the other day. I won't shout out any names, but childhood friend and my kids used to go to Stedman. I'll talk about that later. But the curriculum fighting, anti-racism. Like, talk a little bit about that and why that's so important that you have to put efforts into that in the school system.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, we have to, we
What does anti-racism mean? I think we have to give context. What does anti-racism mean? Anybody, shoot, go ahead. I can give my definition, but go for it.
So my definition of anti-racism is to ensure access and equity in a manner that highlights diversity and inclusion. So we can put that in any law, right? You can dissect any law, you can dissect any protocol with just this understanding of how are we highlighting diversity and how are we highlighting inclusion, right? If we have any form of quantitative data, so people love to play the numbers game with us, right? Love to say, well, it's in the data, right? And then you go look at the data and there's huge disparity gaps, which means people of color are just drowning in that data.
Sure.
Right? And then they'll blame it on something totally different, right? Then it's no longer, let's look at the data. Now let's look at the culture. Let's look at the race. Let's blame it on something else, right? So from a quantitative perspective, are there equity gaps? Are there achievement gaps? Are there opportunity gaps?
Yes, yes, and yes.
And if so, it's racist. And that's what we have to truly digest. I don't care what your color is. You have to understand the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah. And so for me, anti-racism is somebody can say, oh, I'm not racist. Cool. Great job. High five. But what do you stand for if you're not a racist? Are you going to speak up? Are you going to be loud? Are you going to speak against the grain when nobody else is speaking? To me, that's being an anti-racist. To say, no, I will not accept this. No, I'm not going to put up with this.
When you have the option to remain neutral.
What'd you say?
I'm adding to your definition.
Yeah.
You have that option to stay in the middle, or what it
yeah, you can stay in the middle, or you can choose a side.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. No, you're spot on, dude. Yeah. And you could say, all right, I'm gonna be Switzerland and stay in the middle, or you can fly under the rug and say, okay, I'm gonna roll with this, or you can speak up and say, that's bullshit. That's being an anti-racist. To me, it's like being loud and proud.
Activism.
Yeah, and you don't necessarily need to be an activist to be anti-racist, but to speak up in scenarios where racism shows up, microaggression shows up, when these things show up,
Call
you
it
speak
out,
up.
right?
Call it out.
That's
it out.
anti-racism to me.
Yep.
So, I want to take a left turn real quick. My mom, all the women in my family pretty much are educators. My grandmother was an educator in Denver Public Schools. My extended family, educators in Denver Public Schools. My mom up the street was an assistant principal at East High School. And so I grew up in the education system. So when you say black educators are essential, that resonates with me.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Talk to us about the value of having somebody that looks like you, being in the front of the classroom and connecting with the students on a way that they see education differently.
Right. Well, I'll just ask y'all, who was your first black teacher?
I know the one that was the best for me.
Miss Selma in
How
second
many
grade.
black teachers have you had?
I had quite a few.
Did you have quite a few?
Yeah, I did.
I didn't have that many.
I had quite a few, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only because I started off I started off at Union Baptist, which was an all black private school.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So that's where I got my start. That's what I'm saying. I didn't really get exposed to white teachers until I went to McMean Elementary School. And so like my kind of journey has been kind of different, you know.
But my dad was a teacher, so that might have been a difference for us.
It does make a difference.
I would say for me, I don't remember a teacher. I remember Mr. Hainsworth from Hallett.
Principal.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, Hiram Haynes.
Mr. Haynes. There you go. Yeah, my bad.
Do you remember John Buckner by any chance?
Absolutely.
He was my principal.
Okay.
And John Buckner was a brother at Overland High School, and he ran the show. And the dude grabbed me by my elbow every day.
Dragged you to class.
Is that where you get that from?
Is that where you got his biceps from?
Absolutely.
Because you're a big. You were probably a big kid. Were you 200,
No,
300?
it was big.
Why did he grab your elbow when he came to
John
get you the
Buckner,
chicken
I'm not
wings?
going to do it. John
Tisha,
Buckner,
he is on good behavior.
Like this,
They should have
and
grabbed
he
his
would
elbow from
squeeze
good
hard
for
as
keep.
hell
Should have kept your ass
and
from that
take you
lunch
to
from that
class.
lunch table.
We're going
That
to
lunch
class.
pizza.
What'd you say?
So wait, Mike. Getting back to you, I really do want you to talk about the what's going on at the curriculum for Stedman specifically, and like why you focused there. I know we were defining what anti-racism is, but tell us about how you implement that at Stedman, because I think the people need to know.
Yeah, I think, first and foremost, it's giving children, if my babies leave from me with confidence, identity, right, and a voice, that's more than I left. Those are three things, three foundational things, three tangible things, more than I left elementary school with, right?
Right.
If my babies can say, this is who I am, this is what I believe in, and this is how I'm gonna achieve that, I am good, right? From a qualitative perspective, from an experience perspective, right? So our anti-racist curriculum really focuses on who you are as an individual, right?
Got it.
And then we talk about activism and what is activism. We reflect deeply on what does it mean to have allyship, because that's important. We live in Colorado. We are only a single-digit percentage of the population. Right? We need our people that don't go through the daily struggles to really do some of the work.
To speak up.
Man, let's tease that out.
I gotta give a shout out to the parents at Stedman because they are advocates
Absolutely.
in allyship.
What does that mean?
But
What
wait,
does
I
allyship
gotta give
mean?
them a round of applause because they show up. They really do. I can't lie about that. So I'm sorry.
But let's
Go.
define allyship. Because that's a broad term, and sometimes, I don't need you to, depending on the individual, right, kind of defines what allyship means.
And we got a question from the audience.
Yeah, I am so grateful for you all being here and just having this conversation. I'll ground my question, and I'm a PhD candidate in African American history as well as a collegiate policy debate coach. So if
we are so dumb. We're so dumb on this podcast.
I ground that also to say that if what I say makes no sense, that makes sense.
Okay.
But just because I think about these things so often that it sometimes becomes like an insular conversation, which is why I'm interested to hear what you all have to say. So I guess we've been talking about diversity and inclusion, and that sort of being the imperative of what you all think integration has to offer. When I teach a history course, I generally ask the kids to define segregation, integration, and sort of what are the differences, and oftentimes they can't get to that point without saying the end goal, right? So the end goal of integration is that we have a society with diverse perspectives, yet they can exist simultaneously and in peace. So kind of exist separately but equal, which is kind of what you were saying. And a lot of people take that to mean the melting pot. Everyone comes in and then we all agree and we come to a consensus. And I don't know that that's what I teach my students, that we're all trying to get to a point where we're
Like
I think-
kumbaya, is that?
kumbaya, but also just like basically you take on white people's views. So like multiculturalism, basically. And so I guess I'm curious of in your school, how do you use your anti-racist curriculum to generate not even a real world example, right? Because the real world kind of sucks right now.
Yeah.
So we don't want the real world to be replicated. We actually want to train and arm our students with an understanding of what it means to be black and an understanding of what like a future orientation that's like positive. So I'm curious, how do you do that?
Yeah, I think, so just thinking about intercultural development, right? And thinking about that on a continuum from denial all the way to adaptation, right? We, first and foremost, have to have an identity. We have to make sure, so I talk about like a foundation of confidence and identity for our black babies. They have to leave with that, right? Then it's not this, let's have a quality within world.
Right.
That's just not the scenario at all. But it is always working to this form of understanding who you are and highlighting that. African Americans often have to navigate the world in this space, especially professional, in this space of like non-dominant minimization, right? Like, I'm going to be non-dominant, right? I'm going to minimize my culture the best I can.
In order to fit in,
So
kinda
you
thing?
can see the whiteness in me so I can get a job. So if we even think about the Flores situation, again, NFL coach that's happening right now, just filed a lawsuit for
Put everything on the line.
yeah, everything, right? When we think about the Rooney Rule, which is a rule that says if there's a coaching vacancy in the NFL, you have to interview a black guy, and that's part of his case, saying, well, I was Rooney'd, right? Like, people just came to me and just interviewed me, wasted my whole days. They had no interest in
They had
hiring
head
me.
coaches picked
Yeah.
Already.
already, and they
Right.
still interviewed me to go through the motions.
Days later. Yeah.
Just to check the box.
So
Yep.
he has to show up in the space and prove himself as a black man to be whiter than the whitest man that's coming in there,
Exactly.
to present as safe and not harmful. So when we think about our children, they have to have like this component of confidence, this component of advocacy, so they can move forward and present themselves in a cultural way that needs to be accepted by white America as well,
Yeah,
right? So that's a two-way street there.
I don't have to make myself palatable.
No, I definitely agree with that. Respectability politics, definitely a problem. But I am so grateful you answered it that way, because I think that the earlier part of the conversation I was somewhat confused about, because if we agree that segregation gave black students more resources, that having like a unified population made it such that the resource disparity was less, how do we begin to define racism in a space where there's 30, right? Because then quantitatively, the statistics don't align. And that's like really the problem, right? Is like, we think that we want diversity. I actually don't want diversity. What I want is for black people to be treated with respect and dignity. And so I'm using your frameworks and your language to try and articulate something to you that you can conceptualize. But at the end of the day, the resource disparity exists because of black people. It's not resources would make like black students more educated and then like white cops would not shoot black people. Like, that's not the problem. The problem is you. And yes, education is important and resources are important, but I think if we say segregation made more resources, then how do we then justify like more diversity equal better education?
Yeah, so the
Deep.
desegregation of schools is why they wanted to really push on the resources. So when we think about the desegregation of schools, the Wilford Keys case was harnessed on resources in general, right? And it was saying that children in Park Hill, which were black and brown, did not have the same resources. The shift I want to be intentional about is that the resources in the adults. It's not in anything else. Like if we create a foundation where we modeling like what diversity means, which means we're talking about allyship with people that aren't black and brown, and then we're talking about what does it mean to be black and brown in America? How can we solve these problems? Is how we get to the next step in generation. Because telling white America that we want respect,
It's
we're
not going to
here
get you
now,
anywhere.
Right? Like we've
Yeah,
been in this
absolutely.
boat forever.
And so, one of the things I want to just go.
And that was a
touch-
great question.
That was an
That was
outstanding
an awesome
question. And I
question.
want to keep it simple. And my simplistic answer to that is proximity is what's going to help like everybody become a better person. If you live and work in your bubble and don't have access to, let's just say, black kids. My daughter goes to a predominantly white school. I go to the school the other day, and a kid is like, "You have cool skin." Kindergartner. It's like, thanks. Like, what do you say? His proximity to black people really isn't there for him to say that. But then you question, is it? Because he recognizes, hey, this guy's different than me, and I want to connect to that. So there's like a couple different viewpoints you could look at it from. It's like, what is this kid trying to connect to? Is he trying to become closer and his parents are holding him back?
Right.
Or is he just a kid and just saying a really innocent statement?
Right,
see
because
what
I
I'm
don't
saying?
see black people
I don't
a
see
lot.
that in my life a
Absolutely.
lot. So
And that
it
just
gets
needs
really
to be
interesting.
facilitated. So if we have adults with the skill set around that to facilitate that and or even like build the capacity of their parents. Because when we talk about Stedman, I make sure that my parents know, like, if you're coming in here for language and that's it, this is not the school
It's
for
not
you,
the place for you.
right? You have to, you are vowing to these values as well of our four pillars.
What are the values of your school?
Diversity, inclusion, because you can't have one without the other, right? Equity and community.
And with diversity and inclusion, and I'm gonna let you go. Like, tell people why the two need to coincide and why it's important.
Well, we just have to intentionally model that, right? We've had diversity in this country since the conception of what we call the United States, right? And we don't model diversity and inclusion ever, right? We do it at this hierarchy stance to where, we might be diverse, but we're separated. It's just like my middle school experience, right? We were in the same building, but we never interacted, or we were never taught any skill sets
Apart.
to be able to interact in a way that can say, oh, Damien has cool skin. Oh, how can I rephrase that? No, hey, you're different. Like, how can we illuminate?
And I accept you for your differences.
Yep. And let me illuminate who you are for,
Yes.
for your difference.
Thank you.
Right? Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Hi. So there are so many things that we've talked about, and so I'm trying to be thoughtful about what I want to say. But I agree, first of all, with the diversity thing. I was talking earlier, I'm from El Paso, Texas. So border town, Mexican town, not diverse at all, right? Everyone's Mexican. So when everyone is that's not a diverse town. My whole experience was that of mostly one group of people. So even one group of a mostly, minoritized group of people does not make that a diverse group of people. So I think that that's something to keep in mind. So leaving El Paso, Texas was really an eye-opening experience for me. So I think that that's one thing that I want to be thoughtful about. I think the other thing that I want to comment on is that one of the things that is hard is when, the whole foundation of westernized culture is that we keep going back to the fact that it is based on white European males being the foundation and core of what is built as correct and right. And if that is where we start and build everything upon, and that is correct, and that is what we want to use as our foundation and where we go and what we need to be
quote unquote successful, right?
Successful, right, correct, forward moving, foundational, what we need for things to be, good, then that is what's difficult for me. So when we're talking about integration and making things better and stronger, and that is what is, I think, really hard for me to hear. I keep hearing integrating schools and making schools better. I'm like, better based on what? Mm-hmm. If we're basing things on this westernized white standard and using that as the sort of saving grace, that's what's hard for me to hear. So when it's like, okay, so do we want to integrate schools, or would it be okay for a school to be all black or all Mexican or all fill in the blank? I think the answer could be yes, if we're thinking that the alternative is a white savior, all perfection standard. And that is where I think we need to shift how we measure what is good or what is not good. So that is what is really challenging, is how do we measure culture, society, education, language, everything.
It's all about access. It's all about access.
Access.
That's what it is.
When we talk about equity, it's not about putting different groups of people together. It's about providing them with the same opportunity. Like, I remember our friend Kareem, he always talked about how, like, he saw a diagram of, like, people starting at different points, right? How do we provide enough resources to everyone to have a point to where we start off at the same level? We talk about the 30-30-30, right? The 30-30-30 isn't a fix, right? The 30-30 is only a fix when that school is provided the same resources across the board.
Yes, because
right?
a 100% black school to me sounds like a dream.
Mm-hmm.
Actually,
No, and yeah,
for my
you
Afro-Latina
bring up a good
daughter,
point.
like, that sounds like perfection to me if the access to resources is exactly the same access as a 100%.
But I think
problem.
that's the problem.
That's the problem.
That's the problem
Yeah,
is
so
that
I don't want a 30-30-30 to be like, oh, that sounds great to me. That should be what we're aiming towards. No, we should be aiming towards, it should be 100% whatever the community reflects And so that is where I really struggle with how we're measuring good or bad.
That's why.
But I think
Getting
it's
away
like
from those dichotomies.
right, but I think that's where the systemic racism comes in, and you're kind of forced into this. If you're black, you have to diversify and be inclusive because you won't get at the higher up. So it's higher than, in my opinion, the school system, right?
It's
Mike can only do
every
so
system,
much.
Healthcare,
You name it,
politics,
right?
Every system.
So it's like, if I bring it into the corporate world, right, and this is what I'm familiar with, is that those that get funded and get access to the money are white. Mm-hmm. When you're white, you're probably hanging with other white people, right? Mm-hmm. So it all coincides. My CEO is going to be white. My CTO, everybody in the C-suite is white, right? So when you do that, you identify, you put your culture already into the company, which is fine. I don't oppose that at all. But where's the access and the assets for black, brown, so that they could do the same thing, right? So then I think a prime example is here in Colorado, Guild Education, woman started a $1 billion company, and most of her C-suite are women, which I'm all about. You know what I mean? And if you look at it in a shell, it's not diverse. If you just look at the company, but if you look outside of it, that's very diverse, right? Like when you look at all the white males and everything that they got going,
that's a fact.
For her to have her own company and it to be all, white women or just women in general, that's definitely diverse in the whole spectrum of tech. You know what I mean? So I hear what you're saying. It's like, that's where the problem lies of like them getting access to it is like, we don't get the same thing. You know what I mean?
Or Mike. So that's why I love when Mike kind of brought it back to Mike Flores, right? And the pressures
or Brian.
Brian Flores, sorry. and the pressures of being black, a black head coach, right? A black head coach is the same as a principal. You are running an organization, right? And black head coaches having the bandwidth to say, this is what I want my coaching staff to look like, right?
It's not
so
the
if
same
I
thing.
want to, yes,
It's
it
not the
is.
same. It's
It
far from the
is.
same.
It is. If I want to hire all black coaches, if you want to hire all black teachers, that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a problem as a black leader because you want to be safe, because down the road you want to make it palatable for people to take that. For example, the counterpart, Bruce Arians, all blacks in leadership. You had a white head coach, black offensive coordinator, black defensive coordinator. Mike Tomlin, he doesn't have a black defensive coordinator. He doesn't have a black offensive coordinator. Why? Because as a black man, I have to structure my leadership in a way that's palatable to my owner, palatable to.
But this is where allyship comes in. I'm so
Exactly.
sorry to interrupt you, because I'm a faculty member in a PhD program. So we are looking big picture. We have no black PhD students, no people of color applying. We take 0.04% of our applicants. We get 400 applicants. We take 6 students. So how are we going to shift this? So it starts with having white allies on our faculty. The white allies say, how are we going to make this happen? Well, how is this system and structure working against students, right? We know that the GED, for example, and standardized tests do not work for students of color for a lot of reasons, and we do not have time to get into this. Our white allies started to really dig in and do the work and look at this. We decided over 2 years, it's taken 2 years of deep, hard conversations, and this is one of the most patriarchal, white, like the systems that are in place in PhD programs, you know
are
this.
deeply rooted.
Deeply rooted, and we decided one small, teeny tiny thing, but it's huge. The GED and standardized tests set the stage. We decided in this highly competitive program, 400 applicants a year, we take 6 people, we decided we are no longer going to require the GED. Because of the white allies. There are no people of color. I am one of 2 people that they have accepted into this program as faculty.
And you can have a radical takeover of that.
This is literal
So,
radical.
just real quick,
This
time
is
out. Time out. Let's bring it back to Mike. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
but this is what I'm
I
saying
agree
with
with you.
allyship.
I
This is what
agree
allyship
100%.
means is
Good.
people outside. It's not me. It's
No.
the white people shifting
Absolutely.
the rules.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I do want to just say to that point.
And thank you for that question.
Absolutely.
For sure.
And
Yeah, I'm good.
I'm definitely not saying right here, right now, that integration is what's best for all of our babies. What I am saying, whatever we do needs to come through a high level of facilitation. And we live in a world that is just, who's going to be the change agents? Are we?
We
No,
have to
we
be.
have to be.
We have to be.
Our babies is going to have those skills because we've been pushing.
Absolutely.
So if our babies don't have those skills to truly shift, because 96% of the wealth that's ran through this country is white men. So how do we shift that? Like we have a NFL a team that's up for sale right here in this city.
Robert Smith. Let's go.
Come on, Robert Smith.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's my
go.
thing. We have to. But what's sad about it, what I'm trying to get the point I'm trying to make is that it is difficult when you're put in a position as a black man to want to make change, but have to tiptoe around making radical change.
You have to be willing to risk it all.
Yeah, you got to be willing.
You got to be willing to risk it all.
something.
Like Brian Flores is risking his NFL career right now.
I interviewed for
Yeah.
a job before Stedman, and I interviewed in front of a white PTA, and I'm from Park Hill. I could sell water to a well, right?
Right. Talk to him.
right. I can, and when I walked out, it was the first round. There's always 2 to 3 rounds of interviews when you're interviewing for a principalship. And when I walked out, I was told, like, the feedback was, oh, they couldn't see you on the playground with their child.
What
Right.
school?
I'm
Okay.
not gonna blow the school up.
I got you.
But it was a school in DPS.
Okay,
right?
fair enough.
And the instructional supervisor told me, you know, the interview committee just couldn't see you on the playground with their child, right? And which meant, right, like, I wasn't operating out of minimization, non-dominant, right? Like, I wasn't white enough for them, right? As a black man,
And that's the conundrum.
right? So when we talk about these things, especially in white America, where we're trying to plant our feet in positions, are those positions that can truly move a community, right? Like, are we planting our feet in positions that can truly make impact? Right? Ownership.
So
Talk to him.
what are you doing to make impact at Stedman? I've seen it firsthand, but I would love for everybody else to know.
Yeah, tell
What
the
are you doing
listeners.
firsthand?
I'm following the babies in the community, exactly what you should do when you serve a community, right? You know, we are on the heels of a 2-year pandemic, right? And I wouldn't have got through that pandemic without following the lead of the babies, right? Because what we don't realize about children, right? Like, they're these open vessels, and we often want to direct them, right? Like, go do this, go do that. Right? We never stand behind them and tell them to lead.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when we do that and listen to them in their footsteps, it's hard to. We are so damaged, right? Like, we can get in an argument and can't sleep at night,
Yeah.
right? Like, we are damaged beings because we've been through it.
Yeah.
Our babies aren't.
Because
been told to-
because we operate on stop, no, and don't.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, like we can't pull the innocence out of these kids. Like, go. What's new out there? Go explore.
Right.
Tell me what you see.
Right.
That's what I operate on.
Yeah.
Right on,
kill
Mike.
it.
Babies
That was
are
good.
adaptive. Simple as that.
One more question.
Real quick, because you mentioned earlier, Courtney, about essentially culture shock. You went from a predominantly black school to a predominantly white school. I guess my question is for you and Mike in the sense where, A, what's your advice of dealing with culture shock when trying to delegate and collaborate for the better, and even if it's, you know, your own personal experiences, but macroly, how do you translate that to your community, your experience in culture shock? And Mike, how are you preparing, I guess, your students for that when it is time to collaborate?
Yeah.
You know, for important issues that are for all of us as humanity. Like, when we need to get into the grit of those efforts, like, how do we deal with the shock of the different cultures that we're trying to collaborate with?
Right, yeah. You know, we all have those things, and we have to be intentional on, like, how we truly present culture in a way that feels good and illuminates, and also talks about some of the biases and the stereotypes that we have to face every single day, right? From a student perspective to an adult perspective, the culture shock that students see mainly is like, oh, your skin tone is cool, right? That's culture shock for them. That just is telling you, like, they have not been immersed.
Right.
And they need some guidance there. From the adult perspective, right, we do something unique at Stedman. I make sure that all my teachers, when they come in, they take a assessment called the Intercultural Development Inventory. And this assessment is is hard to receive because what it does, it puts a mirror in front of your face, and it tells you exactly how you show up around cultures that are different than yours, right? I can't give a pill and make all of my teachers black, right? By the way, if you're an African American teacher and you want to progress your career in a meaningful way, come to Stedman Elementary.
Hey, if you want a principal all up in your classroom, eyeing you all the time, micromanaging you, come on over to Stedman.
Make you accountable. Come to Stedman.
Make you accountable.
But what I am charged to do is like build the capacity of my white teachers, my teachers that aren't black, my teachers that don't share the same culture as my students. We have 62% of my teaching staff is teachers of color, right? And only 22% of that is black educators. I've been all the way to Atlanta to bring in black educators into my building. I have a young lady who is African American that went overseas to learn Spanish, and she's in my Spanish immersion program. Dope. Like all of those things, like we have to reach outside of our communities to make sure that we have representations of who we know our babies can be, right? So, just to answer your question, the culture shock comes from the teachers. And once my teachers engage in this assessment called the Intercultural Development Inventory, every Friday I have one of the teachers share, right? And they share their culture, their language, their norms, their beliefs, and their artifacts, along with the unpacking of the report. What does that, what are you specifically working on tangibly to be more
culturally aware,
culturally responsive to our babies?
That's dope.
On a continuum to trying to get to adaptation, right?
Cool.
So, and I must add, when we talk about culture and these things, is so vulnerable that I source out. So I work with the University of Denver. Dr. Ellen, shout out to Dr. Ellen Miller Brown. She comes in and unpacks each report with each teacher, right?
Nice.
So there's some distance there, right? So it's not like my principal is judging me on who I am.
Yes.
Right. Like
It's
I
an
have a
outsource.
professional.
That's huge.
That's huge, right? Like I need you to be vulnerable in these spaces because our babies are vulnerable every single day they walk through those doors, and they need vulnerable adults. They need adults that's willing to shift to where they are from a cultural perspective and not asking children to, hey, meet me up here.
Got it. So you got a follow-up?
No, I appreciate you. I mean, the only follow-up I would have is what was your experience specific, or and how did you deal with it specifically?
Real quick, Co.
I struggled, man. That's the easiest way I can say it, man. I struggled.
Because I went through the same thing. I mean, I went to KU, so
I struggled. And the ill thing about it, it's funny you say that, because I took a recruiting trip to Kansas State, and I struggled, man. I struggled with making the shift of being the only black in my class.
To go to Manhattan, as a potential, right?
Yeah, now, it's
Manhattan, Kansas.
I've been to Manhattan, Kansas. It was a struggle for me to fly to Kansas City and get on a four-seater airplane, me and my boy Darcy, to fly to Kansas State University on this 4-seater twin-engine airplane and land. I said, hell no.
Right.
Nice.
So I go to Arizona State University, where it's 2% African-American at the time out of 50,000 students. I struggled. I isolated myself. My roommate was from Dallas, Texas. He was from the North. The North.
The North, as they say.
NAWF. Hey, chill out. He was from the North. The NWF. And we really insulated ourselves. So honestly, man, I really didn't open myself up. I didn't really open myself up to other people until I became a professional. Nice. Until I actually started getting into my career. That's when I ultimately felt comfortable. But in college, it was actually a struggle for me.
Nice. JC.
Real quick, I'm going to give it to JC. What advice would you give to someone going through that right now?
He's like, my man.
Hey, man,
Real quick, Sauce. Give him a
Hey,
sentence.
just be open.
There we go.
Just be open.
JC.
Hello. Dr. John Chapman IV, Esquire. That's me.
Absolutely.
Owner of Lawrence and Larimer.
Yeah.
Thanks again. Shout
Serious
out to
question here. Something that's been bothering me for years. On field day.
Wait a minute. Let me finish the question. So you're gonna the participation ribbons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think everybody's a winner.
Absolutely.
How do you feel about
And let us shine.
Thank you,
in the
John. I
spaces
need
that we
that.
Thank
shine.
you, JC.
Yeah,
It's been
absolutely.
deep.
John,
Thank you.
Goodness.
Everybody gets a ribbon, but it's not the same color ribbon as Stedman.
Okay.
Ah.
You
Okay.
hand out black,
JC, thank
red,
you.
and green, yellow.
You know, we need to start doing something like that.
Power to the
Got
people
it.
type ribbons. I'm just saying.
Hey, real talk. Hey, I'll thank you, JC. We needed that. No, we needed that.
We did. Way to break
And I'm
it
gonna be
up.
off your
Way to
back.
break.
Hey, so one thing that I can appreciate when I went to Stedman, spent a good half day with the
Absolutely.
kids, and the kids are coming to me. They're like, "Hola, ¿cómo estás?" Like they expected me
Word.
Right.
to speak Spanish. It wasn't like, "Oh, he has like darker skin than me." And he's gonna Hola, ¿cómo estás? What you gonna say back?
Right. You better be ready.
Yeah.
Hey, and I love that, man.
Damien ain't know what to say. He thought he was
Man,
on
please.
that at that restaurant on the border.
Hey, I was
He was like, Pollo
El
asado. Pollo asado.
¿cómo está?
I was
Tiene
like,
hombre.
I was like, Uncle Damo's muy gordo.
He was like, El
Tienes hombre.
Southeast Aurora.
Hamburguesa. How you say? ¿Cómo se dice wing in español?
Hey, you say chicken wings.
Hey, so real quick,
Football americano.
so just real quick, we didn't mention your grind, from custodian to
Thank you, Mike.
paraprofessional to teacher's aide to where you are now. So I just want to know, like, what ideally would be the next step for you? Is it that all elementary schools pretty much follow like a similar model to you, or are you trying to go to middle school or high school, or eventually be running DPS?
Yeah, I think right now I need educators to show up differently around children. I am passionate about building the capacity of them from a self-awareness perspective. Often.
Talk to him, man. Talk to him. Yes.
So like I'm not a principal. I don't know what it looks like. So when you're getting together with the rest of the K through 5 people, like what are K through 5 principals, administrators, what are you pushing?
I'm pushing equity.
Equity, yeah.
Equity.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a great question. I heard
Then
you.
why didn't you let him answer it?
He did. We answered at the same time. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, like that's what I heard is equity.
He's pushing E. Pushing
E. There we
E.
go. Pushing E.
Pushing E.
Just because that was my experience, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, I went to school with teachers that were racist, basically, right? We were the bus kids, and they treated us like second class citizens.
And that's why you gotta fight the racism, right? Like
We have
the
to.
anti-racism. Like
Yeah.
it's there.
Or that's why black educators are essential.
Yep.
Hey,
Okay.
I think a question I have for you all, like
Go.
when we think about
Please don't ask us a question.
No,
be
go,
here for
go.
another
Ask.
hour.
We're not as
especially
smart
with
as our
these two.
audience. We don't have PhD candidates. We're not.
Hey,
yeah, we got Leno.
No,
All
we
right,
got you in a
let's-
minute. No,
we got
Let's
you
just go with
Leno.
Leno.
We
Let's
got
go with
you.
I
Leno.
wanna-
No,
We got
ask
you,
this
Leno.
question.
Are you, so my definition of anti-racist is like really driven in like policy work and what serves and like quantitative data. And Damo shared just a different definition for him. But within the confinements of my definition, if you support a policy that isn't working for black and brown children, people in general, does that make you racist?
Yes.
No, it means you are floating the line. You're not racist, but you're not an anti-racist. You're just floating in the middle, going down Switzerland.
Yeah.
That's my thought. Like you're indifferent.
Mike,
Yeah, so-
what's your thought?
So I mean, I'm gonna go with Courtney because like if you're anti-racist, there's no Switzerland. I think is what he's saying. Like
no Switzerland.
You see something, say something. Like
I
granted,
agree.
you might be reaping the benefits of that policy or whatever, but it's like nah, this don't sit well with
Yeah,
me.
I agree.
And that's and that's my whole point with saying that at the end of the day, when you are African American in a leadership position, what you just said to me, Damien, is that you are okay with creating a comfortable environment to where people see you as in the middle. When you're in the middle, you're not choosing a side. And when it comes to racism, you have to choose a side. When you say equity, when you really believe in
I
true
think that's
equity,
different. I think equity's different.
So I'm
Right.
gonna push back. I agree and I disagree because there's been bills that have been passed here lately for the COVID-19 that was specific for Asians. And I think that was something that needs to be put in place. The only thing and maybe this goes into like it didn't help out black and brown people. So it seems like what I get frustrated, and I think we all get frustrated, well, let me say me, I don't want to speak for other people, is that we always claim when it comes to, I'm going to say black specifically, things have to take time. Things have to move slow. We have to go through the process.
Right.
But when we had the COVID-19 bill on the ballot, it went through like that.
but that's not
It
a
was
pushback.
quick.
That's not a pushback, killer.
But can I finish?
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, I guess that's what I said. It goes to the equity of like, yo, when it's our turn, yo, make it happen just like
Right.
that.
Exactly.
And that's the
Exactly.
problem. Like, I think
Exactly.
that's where black people get frustrated is like, yo, we on the side for everybody else. But when it comes to us, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
we got to think about, we got to do this, we got to make
Yeah.
sure the wording's right, we got to put all these things in place,
Exactly.
and then they still get shot down.
And that's what I'm saying, killer. So
Let's
it's
see
not.
what's
So
up
I
with
didn't take that. So I don't take that as
Sauce.
a pushback.
Let's see what's up with
Yep.
Leno.
Go ahead, Leno.
Don't let me interrupt y'all argument.
No.
But now
ahead.
I just really want to speak in the sense of, I didn't really have a question for you, man, but I just want to tell you how important it is to see black leadership within schools, right?
Yes.
And I think at the level that you're at, that's very awesome because, I had the privilege of growing up in the South. I'm originally from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, so all my educators were black, the teachers, the principal, everybody. And then coming to a place like this, it was a culture shock for me. But having that foundation, it did a lot for me because those were people who were in my community, use that word, and those were people who could actually speak to me in the sense of like, boy, I tell your daddy on you, right? You don't want to do this work?
Right.
Watch I call your mom. And then it puts you in a different space, right? And even if those teachers didn't know your dad directly, they knew somebody who knew your mom, could get in contact with him and have a conversation about your future, right? And then coming here, what was cool was the fact of like, well, what was odd for me was that I was the only black kid that threw me. I was like, what? Like, I felt like I was in the jungle. Like,
Culture
at that point,
shock.
right? Because
Absolutely.
all the things I had been taught to survive on were kind of hard, and you know what I mean, and just the reality of what the world was, and then coming to a place like this where it was real watered down. You know what I mean? Like it was. So I had to dumb myself down as far as like what I knew about reality, so I could become educated in a sense, right? Like through books and knowledge sense.
Right.
So it's not really a question, but it's just more or less like giving you your flowers because I think it's real.
Right on.
It's necessary for kids of color to see people of color in positions in their school so they can look at you like, oh, that's like my uncle. That's like my dad, right? That's like my
Facts.
big brother. And I
Facts.
just think you get a better line of communication with those kids to be able to connect with them. So just giving you your flowers, brother.
Good shit, Leno.
Right on, fam.
And you can even hear that.
Absolutely.
You
I
can even
appreciate
hear that how he refers to him, like, yo, this is my baby.
It's my baby.
Yeah.
The way he's talking.
Yeah.
Go ahead. We got a Stedman
Allie.
parent.
Go ahead.
I have a question that's a little more on the personal side, but you mentioned it earlier, so I'm going to ask.
Yeah, I knew it was going to come up.
I know.
Absolutely.
I know you know.
You like Jay's up here being phony.
So one thing that's been interesting about Stedman is because we have low test scores, they haven't tested in the last few years, so they're not necessarily reflective, and test scores are biased and bullshit. Anyway, but people perceive Stedman in a certain way, right? And so I'm curious why a lot of families have choiced out of Stedman or left Stedman in the past. And you were one of those families, Jay. So
Absolutely.
I would love to hear.
I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming. That's why we're here. We're here to talk the
And
truth.
now I mean, those who know me here, I'm biased, obviously.
The hot seat.
Yeah.
The hot
Yeah.
seat.
But I also
T-shirt
love
on.
you,
Why
Jay,
did
and I
you-
love your family, and our kiddos have
Absolutely.
been friends for
Wha-
years. And so I'm just curious because we miss you over at Stedman.
And he's literally like, what, 5 blocks?
5 blocks. Walking distance. No, that's thank you, Allie, for bringing that up. And I wanted to talk about
Thank you,
it.
Allie.
So for me personally, it was real simple because my daughter had been going to Park Hill for, I don't know, until she was like 3rd grade. And then, and you brought this up earlier, so you could call me on it, is that when we came back to visit, I was all ready to go. My kids could get into the bilingual, but she couldn't because she was too old. And I didn't.
Your younger kids.
Yes, my 2 younger kids. So they would have been in first and kindergarten at that time. So you're absolutely right, Allie, of like, because my heart was at Stedman. My kids went to pre-K at Stedman. Erica, shout out to you, lovely teacher. Kids loved her.
Is that
and
Grimes?
Yeah, Miss Grimes.
Yeah.
And and it was that simple for me. It was just like I didn't want the disparity of Michelle not being able to learn Spanish, and my younger 2 would been speaking Spanish, so I didn't want to create that isolation. But yes, Allie, you're absolutely right. And to be honest, like
Anytime somebody says "to be honest," they lying.
Thanks, Damo. But
To be honest,
Parenting is hard.
I would still come in support. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I felt attached more to Stedman parents, and even to this day, than I do at Park Hill.
Right.
Right. Park Hill, pros and cons. I'm not gonna get into it, but my heart is at Stedman. You know what I mean? To be honest, and like anything that's going on in Stedman, I try to support because
We still love you.
Absolutely.
We
I
love
appreciate
both of
that.
the Cain boys. We love Damo.
Thanks, Allie, calling me out.
His baby's
yeah,
coming
absolutely.
next year.
Oh yeah, he's
Jay's
coming
up
for
here
sure.
being phony.
Man, yeah. He's all about inclusion, but took his kids outside of the school 5 blocks.
Absolutely, man.
Hey,
he said, "We gonna
got
walk
another
these
question.
2 miles up here."
Yeah.
You got another question?
Yeah, talk about
Both
where
ways.
your kids go.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for all your gems. They've been placed on your crowns and placed on my crown as well for knowledge. One thing I wanted to ask you, though, is being an African American principal. I go to a dominantly, it's not biracial school, but it's less African Americans there. Where when we look at each other, we're shocked to see each other in the hallways. Where we sit in the class, there's no other black people. It's just predominantly white, Asians, and that's it. So I wanted to ask, how do I allow myself to shine in the midst of all of it when there's darkness in it? And it's not allowing me to shine the way I want to shine as an African American, Native American human being. So I am mixed, and it's kind of hard to show people that I'm just like you, even though I'm a different biracial person. So I really want to know, how do I shine my glory and shine as an individual there to where I can stand out for my communities in a way that represents them to the fullest with Black excellence and indigenous American.
BIPOC.
Hey,
BIPOC.
I think
BIPOC.
that's
question.
an
BIPOC.
amazing question.
Amazing
Absolutely.
question.
Do you mind can I take a stab at this?
No, she asked the principal.
Yeah.
Damo.
No, if any of y'all,
I'll take that.
any of y'all.
Go ahead, Damo.
We're going to start with the principal.
No, we're starting
gonna
with
start
the
principal
guest.
first.
Okay.
Damo's always here.
Yeah.
You know, I think
Stroke
this-
him later. Pause.
Damn.
Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
I think what you're talking about is why we do the work at Stedman and why it's so important for our babies to grow up with capacity in that. What I would tell you is just to be the queen you are and not respond out of like a minimization of culture or non-dominant. I can't show up like this because I'm perceived like that. Just continue being the queen you are. It's not us. It's not up to us to adapt. And it was 2 years ago until I realized that, like at 40 years old, right? I had to realize like it's not up to me to adapt to white America. It's up to white America to adapt to me.
Facts.
So keep shining. Don't be you. Don't act out of minimization, which means minimizing your culture. Don't try and be very passive, which means non-dominant. Be you, queen, and just continue being you.
Yas, queen.
Nicely said.
Hey, and so just real quick.
Wait, can we get to, because we are about to wrap up, Damo.
Oh, I thought I was.
I'm going to let you answer this question because you got a question coming.
State your name.
And your business.
Hi.
And your connection.
Yes.
Please.
Okay. Letitia Danielle Wright. I am the wife of Uncle Damo.
Okay.
And I don't necessarily have a question, but your statement, where are you? Where did you go?
The
Where did the
lovely young
go?
lady.
Come here.
Oh, she's coming back.
Yeah.
She about to start crying.
I am. Because as I listen to this young woman, it resonates with me around how we as brown women of color, will minimize who we are in order to fit in. What I'm here to tell you is, as our friend over here, our principal said, don't dim your light for anyone.
Right.
Don't try to fit in where you need to be. Allow people to fit in around you.
Yep.
Allow your light to shine. And I really need you to understand that, because that is what we as brown women always get into, this vicious cycle of doing, is dimming our light to fit in. And it's enough of that. It's over. You know, my husband just mentioned that I have, are you smirking?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Yeah, he got to go home.
I feel very passionate
Not at
about
all.
it because Damian mentioned that we have a brown girl, a 5-year-old that goes to this predominantly white school.
And she's
where
such a diva. She's such a diva.
Let her
she
get
is,
it off.
and she comes home and says, "Mommy, I want to have skin a little lighter like you and my sisters," or "Mommy, I want hair like you know our neighbors." I fear that, because I fear that I'm going to also hear my daughter say, "How do I fit in? How do I allow my light to shine?" Because I'm around all these people that are dimming it.
And she's so beautiful, man.
She is.
Thank you. Thank
Man, I
you.
know
She's
one
a
thing
gem.
that Damo is honest about. One thing that Damo's honest about. He's like, how do I have these beautiful daughters?
I don't know how.
Yeah.
He said,
I'm
I don't
ugly
know
as
how I
fuck.
have these beautiful daughters.
So now I see where you get your comments and
Yeah,
you know,
no. So
your
real
feedback
talk.
from.
So the bottom line, anybody who needs to hear this message is be authentic to yourself. That's the most simple term, because I would have never guessed Native American and black. I would have just seen a black woman. My daughters are fair skinned. My 2 oldest daughters are fair skinned, and I had to teach them early. You're like, when people see you, they see you're a black woman. They embrace that now, which is great.
Yeah.
Danielle, she knows she's a black woman. or a black girl, she's 5 years old, but she has questions in her head that like, how do I really fit into this equation? And it really comes into the parents to say, this is what, like, you're worthy, and let me tell you why.
Man, yes, man. And shout out to the Wright family for raising 3 beautiful, extremely beautiful young girls, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Shout out to the Wright family.
Shout out to the Wrights. Shout out to the Hysaws. Shout out to the Cains. And shout out to the Atkins. Mike Atkins. Let's give him a round of applause.
Yes,
Thank you
man.
for joining us.
And Mike, got a real last question for you. We really appreciate you being on the show. Love it, man. And I know we got kind of derailed at times, but at the crux of it, it was really dope. Who else would you want to come on this.podcast?
Oh, wow. There's some amazing people in Park Hill doing some major work. I think about Park Hill Collective Impact. I think about Dane Washington Sr. I think about Kirk Stevenson. I think about the coaches, the Franklin Herds, the Jamie Sanders, all of the Park Hillians, man.
Chic.
Chic, yes, absolutely. Sade.
Cool.
I have some amazing, like, Kids Above Everything doing some amazing work at Stedman. I have the Launch Network that's doing some amazing work at Stedman. I have Chic that's doing amazing work at Stedman. And that's what it's about. Like, when we talk about community, we have to get community in our schools, right? Like, community. I see schools like churches in the 60s doing civil rights.
Yeah.
Nice.
Like, how can we get our communities back in our schools to use that as their space? Because they have been discriminated against. Our brown members of our community have been discriminated in a way to where they're fearful to step in schools. They've been judged, saying that they're not good parents, that they don't engage in their child, that they don't care, and all the above, right? So how can we shift that for our families? And one way we can do that is making sure that our community, right, like our community organizations, our nonprofits, are in the school and seen by our babies as educators.
Nice.
So who we coming after, man? So who we coming after? That's the
I think he gave us a whole list to go after, Coach. So we could pod all night, but I'm sure our audience is ready to go.
I don't think they're ready.
And you never stumble upon the unexpected if you only stick to the familiar. So go out there, support the community.
And Stedman.
And Stedman. In the house.
Please do it.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. So good to come up.
This podcast.